Hi, everybody. This is Dick Morris. I'm doing something new now, which is a program that I hope we'll be able to do daily called Deep Six, the Deep State. And I'm going to be talking about really the truth about what we face with the intelligence community in doing its best to overthrow Donald Trump. I'm going to be taking your comments and questions and answering them, so feel free to ask anything or make any comments that you want. I appreciate you coming in. Thank you, Iris, and thank you, Gina. Basically, we have to understand that there is at work here a deep state, which is the intelligence community attempting really to run the government by itself, or run it according to its own specifications. The CIA and the FBI have become essentially a world unto themselves, in which for decades they have refined their skills at toppling governments, overthrowing them, and basically getting the people they wanted installed into power. First, they attempted this in foreign countries, from Guatemala and Iran, Chile, Congo, and a number of others. And then they took it to the United States in 1974, 73 and 74, when, working in concert with the media, they toppled Richard Nixon. It's important to understand that the way Woodward and Bernstein broke that story is that Mark Felt, who was the deputy head of the FBI and really running it after Hoover retired, he was the deputy, but L. Patrick Gray, the administrator, was on a Tuesday to Thursday work week, so it didn't amount to much. And Felt, who was Deep Throat, would meet with Woodward in a parking garage and direct him on what to do. And it was essentially an FBI-run investigation of the president. Now, the mere fact that Nixon was guilty and deserved being removed had nothing to do with it. The fact is that it was really the first time that the intelligence community had acted the way the military often does in other countries in effecting a coup d'etat, working hand in glove with the liberal media that covered it and gave it its explosive quality. Well, when Donald Trump was elected, these folks did not like it. They saw him as dangerous. They saw him as taking us back to an earlier time that they hated. The CIA and the FBI underwent a huge transformation during the Obama years. Brennan at the CIA and at the FBI, Eric Holder, set in motion a real house cleaning, where they got rid of many of the people who were in charge there, many of the main agents, and they put liberals and their own fellow travelers in their place, so that these agencies have gone from the bastions of conservatism, where the FBI hunts down radicals within the United States and the CIA hunts down communist regimes abroad, to instead being bastions of liberalism, of radicalism, both at home and abroad. And when Trump was elected, he had interrupted their plans. They had planned on 8 years of Obama and 8 years of Hillary, and have 16 years in which they could move America in a decisively leftist direction. And they are not going to let that go easily. So they're using the tools that they honed in other countries, leaks from intelligence sources, fabricated leaks, innuendo, rumors, and all kinds of stuff, leaked to the media, which sensationalizes it all, working off a Congress that is, in many cases, compliant to get rid of a president. And what we're really watching here is an intelligence coup, a coup d'etat by the intelligence agencies. And it's a very dangerous phenomenon, and it's one that we need to recognize. When you think about the whole issue of Russian intervention, the first point is that even if Russia was behind these hacks of the Democratic Party, they didn't make any difference. Hillary entered her convention on the day that those leaks were exposed. Trump had just finished his convention, and Trump was 4 points ahead. Hillary regained those 4 points and moved out to an 11-point lead at the end of July when her convention ended. So this entire period was not at all characterized by Hillary falling apart, damaged by these leaks. It was characterized by Hillary moving up sensationally, gaining a total of 15 points from the time her convention opened to the time it closed. And since the average over political history has been a 10-point gain, it has to be marked as one of the more successful convention periods in our history. And yet that was the period that was marred by the release of the DNC emails. Donald Trump won this election having nothing whatever to do with those leaked emails. The only role that any emails played were the emails that, of course, were Hillary's, that she was attempting to cover up, that she had written on her private server, and that she was attempting to delete. And so the leaked emails from the hacked emails had nothing whatever to do with it. The other key point is that from the very beginning, the intelligence community tried to plant the idea that Donald Trump was in cahoots with Vladimir Putin to steal the election. And the intelligence community kept coming out with findings that the Russians were behind this, that they did it because they didn't like Hillary, because they wanted to elect Trump. And all during the election, that stuff surfaced and became really dominant. It was impelled by a dossier, which came out from research by a guy named Christopher Steele, who is the former British former MI6 agent, a spy. And Steele tracked down all kinds of information about Donald Trump, none of which was accurate. Information that, for example, had one of his staff members in Prague arranging all this stuff when he was never in Prague. And it had talks about prostitutes in hotel rooms in Russia when that never happened. So this dossier, as well as all kinds of stuff from the intel community, dominated the news media. And Hillary used it in the debates, but when she lost the election, for reasons having nothing to do with this, they just continued their efforts. They continued to try to get rid of Trump. There was an ambush which got rid of General Mike Flynn, in which he was accused of working with the Russians, whereas in fact he was just doing his job as the incoming national security advisor. And then when Trump tried to control his own FBI to do a competent job, basically to follow down these leaks and to eliminate them so that national security information was not being bandied about, so that the text of presidential phone calls with foreign leaders would not be published in the newspaper. Comey refused to do it, was ineffective at doing it, and finally had to be fired, and now that firing is being seen as part of an ongoing conspiracy by Trump. And this is just outrageous. Underneath all of this talk of an investigation, of a conspiracy, of everything, there is absolutely no evidence. There's no basis for believing that Donald Trump is doing any of this or was behind any of this. And yet they're pushing this line and they're doing everything they can. So let me take a call here. Do you have any, Eileen, that have come up that are worth looking, that we could talk about?
You said you were getting over there. Just a second. Keep talking.
Yeah. Well, I'll be happy to answer your comments or your questions, and let me know what you think. I see with reference to the Young Turks. I really enjoy their show. I enjoy doing their show. I don't agree with them on anything. The question from Dan about Seth Rich, the DNC staffer who was murdered 2 weeks before Hillary's convention opened. And he was murdered on a Washington, D.C. street, allegedly in a robbery. But it was the most unusual robbery you've ever seen. None of his cash was taken. His watch wasn't taken. His wallet wasn't taken. Nothing was taken at all. But he was shot twice in the back. And apparently there were bruises all over his face. There had been a serious scuffle. Yet the D.C. police did only a perfunctory investigation. The bar, for example, that Seth was in that night drinking before he went out onto the street, the bartender and the manager were never questioned. Nobody ever questioned anybody in the bar as to anything that Seth may have done there. Now, Kim.com, who is a character who has been accused of doing all kinds of rip-offs on the internet, of pirating material and using it for his own commercial advantage, but is nevertheless fluent in the ways of the internet, says that he knows WikiLeaks and that he knows Seth and that he knows that he was involved in this, in outing the DNC emails. And it could be that the Russians had nothing to do with it. It could be that it was entirely done by Seth, who was a DNC staffer who was murdered in the process. This could be a new rumor that he used to dog the Clintons, that they were killing people. But I think that it bears some investigation. But the basic point is that the emails didn't matter. They had nothing to do with Hillary's defeat. If anything, the accusation that he was too close to Putin was more damaging to Trump than the emails were damaging to Hillary Clinton. And the idea that this elected Trump is ludicrous, and the idea that he led this that he was involved in this. Now, I have some interesting understanding of what happens with special prosecutors when they get into power. I lived with them in the Clinton years and with Kenneth Starr. Remember that Starr was hired to investigate a failed real estate deal, and that the deal, they could find no evidence of corruption in that from Clinton, and didn't indict him. They went after everybody else. They didn't indict Clinton. But they did go after Monica Lewinsky. And they broadly interpreted their mandate to say, we're not just here to investigate Whitewater, we're here to investigate any crimes that come up that we see. And they tied the nation into knots for years over that scandal. The Valerie Plame scandal is another example. The special prosecutor, Patrick Fitzgerald, was hired to investigate who leaked to the media the fact that Valerie Plame was a CIA agent. That was a violation of law because it would compromise her identity and make her subject to, perhaps, to revenge or any violence. So who was the reporter who leaked that Valerie Plame worked for the CIA? After a year of investigating, they figured out who it was. They asked the guy, and it turned out that he had leaked it, but he was authorized to leak it. It was allowed, and that nothing he did was illegal. So the special prosecutor is sitting there with a large budget, a large office, and a lot of young, expectant faces of U.S. attorneys and would-be prosecutors who want to kind of make it on their own. And they were hoping this would be an upward ticket in their career. And now it turns out that there was nothing there. So to justify his keep and to keep himself relevant, he needs to indict somebody. So he went after Scooter Libby, as chief of staff to Dick Cheney, and for nothing to do with the scandal, just for perjury. Let me just see if I can read some of these. Is Mueller a swamp creature? I don't have anything against Mueller per se. I think that Mueller might be a decent U.S. Special prosecutor, but ultimately the job itself is a creature of the swamp. The job itself is to prosecute one man, and you never do anything else. And you have this whole staff dependent on getting this one man. So they all go after him like it's the last boat. And they all do that to keep their careers going and keep themselves relevant, keep their budget, and keep their staff. And it really ends up not mattering whether he's guilty or not, because they can always get him on a process violation, the kind of thing that would not happen if there were not an investigation. Libby, for example, never would have committed perjury if he hadn't been asked questions that were pertinent to the investigation. And it was an investigation of nothing. No crime had occurred. Yet because he made a misstatement of fact that was not related to the crime necessarily, he was indicted and convicted of perjury. That's how these guys operate. And remember one very important thing. The Republicans won't really mind it if Trump is thrown out of office. The Democrats, when Clinton was threatened with impeachment in the Lewinsky scandal, were a solid phalanx of support for him, 100% behind him, morning, noon, and night. And nobody, only 2 or 3 people defected on some of the charges, and he was acquitted with the virtually unanimous vote of the Democratic Party. You're not going to see that with Donald Trump. Of the guys who are in the Senate, or women who are in the Senate, who are Democrats, who are Republicans, 6 or 7 didn't even endorse him after he won the Republican nomination. One of them endorsed another candidate, the third candidate, the so-called independent conservative. I forgot his name, but McCain endorsed him. And those people are not going to be a phalanx, and they're going to abandon Trump as soon as they can. They'd be very happy with President Pence because he's not controversial. He hasn't gotten people mad at him. And the problem is that this is a slippery slope downward once they appoint a special prosecutor. And you don't know where this is going to end. So this is a very dangerous situation, not just for Donald Trump, but for our democracy. We are literally facing a coup d'etat led by the intelligence community, the deep state, in coalition with the liberal media, which will print anything and blow it out of proportion, and with a Congress that's not prepared to stand up and defend the president, even if he's a member of their own party. So that when you put this together, this is a very, very dangerous situation, and one that really causes deep concern. We have the whole nature of this is destruction by leaks. You've heard of the idea of death by 1,000 cuts. Well, this is death by 1,000 leaks. And the whole idea of a leak, the anonymous leak, is that nobody knows it happened, nobody can stop it, nobody can be held accountable for it. The media covers it up. And if you look at the sourcing of all of these stories, they're all anonymous leaks. I mean, for goodness sakes, Donald Trump just recently met with the two leaders of Russia in the Oval Office. And the meeting was leaked. There was an accusation there that he compromised national security, all independently, anonymously given. We don't know who these people were that said that. Now, the fact is that the President of the United States is not bound by the classification of information. He's the only one who's not. If he feels that it is useful to give classified information to another party, he can do so with no problem. And I think that Trump was basically trying to get Russia to involve itself more in the war against ISIS and to do more to protect civilian air populations, civilian populations that are flying on airplanes, passengers. But I think that when it was leaked as being a violation of the classified system, and that he was leaking classified information, he wasn't able to defend himself because he couldn't call out the people who were leaking it. And they had a whole group of people who ratified themselves, one after another, of saying how shocked they were about this. And then it was part of the process of building up to getting rid of Donald Trump. Now, this video is sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. In this economy that is so turbulent and subject to such incredible changes as we move on, the instability surrounding President Trump, the instability surrounding our whole government, I think makes gold a very good investment. And when you also look at the prosperity we're going through under Trump, job creation way up, unemployment down, people are dropping out of the workforce are going back in now. In this situation, the likelihood of inflation, I think, is substantial. And gold and silver are about the only ways you can really protect yourself. This is not about making money, it's about keeping money. But yet gold and silver also earn money because China is buying tremendous amounts of gold, as is Russia. There's a real surge in the gold and the silver market. And you can expect that these metals will probably increase in value over the near term. Now, the Patriot Gold Group has a special message for people who already have holdings of silver or gold, particularly in 401ks. These holdings were often bought years ago or months ago, and you buy them from a broker, and the broker gets paid when he makes a sale, and afterwards he doesn't want to bother with it because he's already got his money and his commission and he walks away. But when the market changes, when it becomes better to have more gold or more silver, or maybe some other metals outside of that, other precious metals, or when the tax laws change and the advantage of keeping it in certain ways changes, this is information that he doesn't bring you because he has no ongoing relationship with you. So the Patriot Gold Group is offering a free audit of your system. They call it a challenge, a 5-minute challenge. They say a 5-minute phone call will permit them to give you advice about your current holdings for free and really update your portfolio and be able to get the maximum advantage out of it. And if you make that phone call, they're going to give you they give you advice, they're going to give you a free silver dollar, a American Eagle dollar, as thanks for doing that. So go to patriotgoldgroup.com, patriotgoldgroup.com, to take advantage of this and to get this audit. Now, with Trump in the Middle East right now, the question is, of course, can he do anything? Can he do anything? Can he bring peace and stability to the region? Well, I think that's a phony question, because I think that the underlying reality is that neither the PLO, nor Hamas, nor Hezbollah, nor any of those organizations want peace. In fact, their leaders are kept in power and kept in money by not having peace. Whenever you have a traditional situation where you have a refugee population, there are strong efforts from the United Nations to resettle those refugees, either back in their original homes if the war is over, or in some other place where they're happy, and to get them out of these horrible refugee camps. But the Palestinians are a complete special case. They were displaced from their homes in 1967, 33, 43, 47 years ago. And there's, I'm 67 to 07, no, that's 40 years ago. And they don't want to be resettled. They want to come back to their old homes. And the prospect of doing so keeps them at the edge of their seats. You know, I'm sorry, I just did the math in my head, 50 years ago. And they're constantly looking for the right of return. And their leaders exploit that by saying, you just work with us, commit these acts of terror, be militant, be strong, and demand resettlement, and ultimately we'll bring you back there. And in the meantime, they get massive amounts of aid from the United Nations, from the United States, and from the European Union. Now, Trump has cut that aid back. We used to give them in the neighborhood of $700 or $800 million a year. Now we're giving them less than 400, and we may completely cut that. But I think that it's a very important concept that these leaders make their living and get their sustenance from the need of that population to be resettled, and that there is no incentive, no reason for them to come to a settlement, to an agreement. They're protected by the international community. Israel is not prepared to bomb them or kill them all. It's prepared. It tries to keep it from being attacked, with its wall, but ultimately they control the game because they can inflict acts of terror as they wish. And the idea that you can negotiate is like one hand clapping. You can't do it unless you have a partner who's willing to make peace with you. And there's no indication that these folks are. So the idea of will Donald Trump bring peace is, I think, itself an illusory one. The idea that peace can be brought is illusory. Now, Netanyahu understands this, and Netanyahu clearly gets that. And under the Democratic administration, which was overtly anti-Israel, he was playing for time. He was basically trying to ride out the presidency. And when Obama got reelected, he got a stomachache, but he put up with it, and he figured he'd just wait out until Obama left. Now he has left, and Trump, who is a devout and strong, constant, reliable, and continuous friend of Israel, is now in power. But there's a big difference to the situation between now and what it was a year or two ago. Obama's work in helping Iran to survive, to thrive economically, protecting that horrible regime from the consequences of its own actions, the sanctions that have crippled their economy, had crippled their economy. Obama jumped in to solve all those problems, opened the spigots to liquidating their assets in the United States, and to getting billions of dollars, essentially of foreign aid, from the United States, from their own assets, and stabilized their economy. Now, once that happened, Iran was free to really pursue and develop the bomb. They're technically not allowed to do it for 10 years. We'll see about that. But they certainly are able to keep their centrifuges enriched and their bomb-making capacity up there and healthy. So now the Saudis and the Emirates and a lot of the moderate regimes, Egypt too, are reaching out to Israel and essentially making common cause with it. They are more afraid of Iran than they hate Israel. And it's a real opportunity for the Middle East to divide along a new axis, not pro-Israel or anti-Israel, not Jewish or Muslim, but instead Shiite Iranian versus everybody else. And going to the Middle East and doing this diplomatically, I think, has a real potential, not for peace, but for security for Israel, and for a real diminution of terror. Now, the Saudis are playing a balancing act, because on the one hand, they're financing terror, and on the other hand, they're trying to stop it. And I think that we need to call that bluff, and I think Trump is going to do a very effective job of that. But it is a new era in the Middle East that Trump's visit signifies, and I think that's very important. It was also such a vast relief to have the President of the United States not stand up there and say, with his hat in his hand, I'm sorry, we've done bad things in the past, mea culpa, we've engendered strife, and please forgive us and only attack us a little. It was so nauseating when he gave that speech in Cairo in his first year in office. And what has it gotten him? Has terrorism dropped? It's dramatically increased. And Obama's policy of appeasement and weakness, I believe, is absolutely at the core of enabling this. And now, thankfully, we have a president who stands up there and says, this is not a clash of civilizations. This is not a clash of religions. This is not two groups that disagree. This is civilized humanity against medieval barbarism. And we're working here against the evil enemy. This is a fight between good and evil. Now you can say, what difference would that make? Why just giving speeches to your enemy, what's that going to do? Well, remember that it was definitely Ronald Reagan's, and to some extent Jimmy Carter's, offensive against the human rights offenses of the Soviet Union, labeling the Soviet Union an evil empire and exposing what they were doing to Solzhenitsyn or Sakharov and all of the human rights activists, and exposing what went on in the Gulag and what they were doing, that undermined international and domestic popular support for the radical Soviets, and really forced them to change. Ultimately, it was their inability to control their own population that led to the fall of the Soviet Union. I have to say that I'm a little bit less than thrilled with the idea that Trump had to send Priebus and Bannon home from the Middle East to come in to run crisis management against Mueller and against the FBI. I've been in an administration where there's a special prosecutor, and it takes over. All you end up doing is playing defense or counterattacking the prosecutor or servicing his demands for documents or demands for testimony. And the fact that this is all about a nothing scandal, it's about something that didn't happen. Very hard to prove what didn't happen. And this whole notion clearly gets in the way of the diplomacy and the aggressive activity that Trump needs to show. Now let's switch gears for a minute. Obamacare could be a thing of the past in the next week or two. Trump has in his power right now the ability to kill Obamacare. Not to replace it, but to kill it. Not to repeal it, but to kill it and bankrupt it. Obamacare had a safety clause in it, which said that if by some chance there weren't enough people who were young and healthy who signed up for the program, and if by chance there were too many people who were old and infirm and sick and had large bills, so the insurance company couldn't make ends meet in providing the coverage Obama made them provide, then you could get access to a federal bailout fund of hundreds of millions of dollars, ultimately billions, and that fund would sustain the insurance companies. Essentially, it made the insurance companies public utilities, guaranteeing them a rate of return, guaranteeing them survival. And that was the payoff that they got in return for supporting Obamacare. But the president does not have to send that money over to them. The president can elect not to pay them that money. And Congress can delete the appropriation. In fact, it was about to in the most recent budget deal when the Democrats threatened to shut down the government if they did that. But just because it's in the bill doesn't mean it needs to be spent, because it's not an entitlement. It's a grant in aid that the president gives at his discretion. Well, I think that what Obama should do is that Trump should do is close Obamacare down right away. Just get rid of it. Stop making those payments. The insurance companies are then going to announce that they will no longer sell or renew Obamacare insurance policies, and the program will die. It'll die in a moment, like cutting off the oxygen supply. Now, the Democrats will raise hell and say you're depriving 20 million people of health care. Well, first of all, a third of that 20 million are on Medicaid, and there's no injury to their health care. It continues as a welfare program. And about 6 million of them get their coverage through their employers, and there's no reason why that need terminate. The issue is the individual people who are covered, 6 or 7 or 8 million of them, most of whom had health insurance before Obama made them drop their coverage. But Trump has proposed a perfectly reasonable plan to cover those people, subsidize the premium, and most important of all, reduce the need for the premium by not making people pay for services and insurance that they don't need. If you're a man, you don't need to buy maternity benefits. If you're young and don't need anything more than catastrophic coverage, that's all you need to get. If you're sane, you don't need psychiatric coverage. If you don't use drugs, you don't need substance abuse therapy. All of these Christmas ornaments laden the health insurance policy to a point where the premiums are outrageous and people can't afford to pay them. And the result is that they don't enroll in Obamacare, and because the risk pool gets older and sicker, the premiums and deductibles go higher and higher, and eventually the vicious cycle sets in, only stopped by this stopgap of federal subsidy to the insurance company. And if Trump eliminates that, then they're going to come face to face with the consequences of the disaster that Obamacare is. Now, once Obamacare is destroyed, the Democrats really have to come to a deal. There has to be then fashioned a reasonable replacement for Obamacare. They can't sit there and say, we're not going to debate and we're not going to vote on a solution. We're going to let everybody be out there without medical care. The Democrats are hoping that if that happened, people would blame Obama, and undoubtedly a few would. But most people would understand that the Republicans are trying to pass a bill to replace Obamacare, and that the Democrats are filibustering it and won't even allow it to come up to a vote. And I believe that that scenario is precisely what we could do to get rid of Obamacare and to stop this from destroying our budget and really just ripping us apart. The Trump proposal and the Ryan proposal for replacing Obamacare is a very reasonable one. And ultimately, by lowering the cost of the policies, by removing that list of 10 essential services that must be covered in the policy, we really will be able to cut the cost and to make health insurance available with tax credits. But again, on a voluntary basis. Let people decide to get it or not. Don't try to require anybody to get it. Don't require employers to offer it. And I think that if that happens, we can really solve this problem very soon. One other thing that's been bothering me lately is that there are increasing reports of genital mutilation going on in the United States. You know what that is, the horrific removal of the female organs. And it's widely practiced in Africa and in Muslim nations throughout the world. And it's a very frequent occurrence, one that the United Nations has tried to stamp out and try to educate people not to do. But with the Muslim immigration coming into the United States, the New York Post is exposing its spread within the U.S., and it represents a very serious threat. And the United States government should make a priority in fighting this and going after this. And I think they need to do that, and I think it would be effective if they did. So stick around for a minute. I want to talk to you about the Patriot Gold Group. And when we come back, I'm going to talk about what one step we could take right now that would do the most we ever could to destroy Sharia law and destroy the terrorists and Muslim extremists. In this economy, with the problems that it's having and the instability, you're really wrong if you don't invest a portion of your portfolio in precious metals or something else that is a hedge against inflation. What Obama did was to print money. He printed money like crazy. He created about $3.2 trillion of new money, not backed by anything except the word of the Federal Reserve, but he issued it. And the money supply rose from about 400 million to 4 billion to 4 trillion, rose from 800 billion to 4 trillion during his administration. Now, that money would normally come flooding into the economy, cause a tremendous increase in buying power, get the economy moving again, huge job creation, huge everything as people spent that money. But in fact, none of it happened. In fact, the economy grew at a sluggish 2%, essentially just treading water. Why? It wasn't that Obama didn't print enough money. He kept trying to print more money. But because people wouldn't spend it. Individual households used it to pay down their mortgages or their credit card debt. Banks increased their reserves by over $1 trillion rather than lend that money out because they were so afraid that the businesses would fail and they'd be stuck with bad loans and penalized for it by the regulators. And corporations increased their cash holding by $2 trillion. They thought so little of the economy They had so little confidence that they were willing to stash it under their mattress at 0% interest in order to avoid risking losing it. And $1 trillion of it is offshore, and people won't bring it back into the United States because of their fear about the economy and because of the tax consequence. Now, Trump is setting about solving all of these problems. And you can see that it is not just his programs that are solving it, it's him. Come on, if you're looking at setting up a small business, which would you rather do it, under Obama or under Trump? Under which are you more certain that you'd not be put out of business by onerous regulations? On which are you more certain of a friendly and regulatory environment to entrepreneurial initiative, under Obama or under Trump? Obviously, the answer is Trump. And what that's doing is job creation, over 200,000 a month, a significant decrease in our foreign trade deficit, and real increase in the pace of the economy. So what all of that means is that all that money that's been hidden away, waiting to come out, is going to suddenly come out all at once, triggering some very significant inflation. And that's why the Fed is raising interest rates. And the only hedge against inflation is investment in precious metals. The difference between the Patriot Gold Group and any other gold or silver brokerage firm is that they only charge, they do not charge consulting fees, they don't charge ongoing maintenance fees, they simply charge the cost of the metal plus the commissions that everybody gets, but not the special fees that almost every other firm ladens on. So you're basically just paying for the metal, and therefore you can get vastly more of it. Now, the Patriot Gold Group is willing to audit your holdings in precious metals, a process they can do over the phone, and give you advice on it. Advice on it for free. And if you avail yourself of this, they'll give you a free silver dollar, golden eagle, silver eagle medal, a coin. And the point is that since you bought your portfolio, things have changed. Gold has gone up, silver is not as much. There have been other precious metals that come onto the horizon that are worth a lot, and you really ought to rethink your portfolio, and they're willing to do that for you for free. If you try to call your old firm, you won't get any callbacks because they've already made the sale. So the Patriot Gold Group challenges you to call them and to discuss where you're at. PatriotGoldGroup.com. PatriotGoldGroup.com. There is an institution called Sharia-compliant funds. Any bank in the United States or in the world has a portion of its portfolio set aside for Sharia-compliant funds. The idea is that this is funding that will not go to anything that could violate Sharia law. For example, no truck carrying pigs, no pornography, no aid to Israel, no defense firm that supplies Israel with weapons can get Sharia law regulated investments. So Citicorp, any of them, have these multi-trillion-dollar portfolios, and a portion of it, globally coming to almost $2 trillion now, is earmarked for Sharia compliance, saying that if you put your money in this fund, none of it will be spent in things that violate Sharia law. And this then becomes the tail that wags the dog. First of all, the Sharia-compliant funds pay management fees to major Islamic figures and mullahs and religious leaders to monitor their policies and be sure that they're Sharia-compliant, be sure they're kosher, if you will. And they get management fees for this, and a significant flow of money, probably the major flow of money to these extremist organizations, many of which are on the Attorney General's list as terror sponsoring organizations. And in addition, whenever you make a mistake and the fund and you put money into the fund, which is then used for some purpose contrary to Sharia law, the bank gets fined and pay a hefty penalty to a special fund that is set up for charity, which in fact is aid to the terrorist groups. And these sources of revenue, the normal administrative fund and the penalty fund, the charity fund, are very significant sources of revenue for the radical terrorist organizations in the world. Now, these banks are under federal regulation, most of them, and they could be forced to divest themselves of their Sharia-compliant funds or penalized from doing business in the United States if they maintain these funds. And yet this is the financial wellspring and core element that is keeping terrorism going in our world. And it lies within our capacity to kill it. Frank Gaffney, my close friend, who used to be Undersecretary of Defense under Reagan, Deputy Undersecretary or something like that, as the Center for Security Policy. And in that he's really explored Sharia-compliant funds and is leading an effort to get banks to abandon them and to find banks that will not have those funds and to urge people to put their money in that and work in those vehicles. Let me return to the topic we began this with. We are facing an intelligence coup d'etat in the United States, with the intelligence community working with the Democratic Party, with its sycophantic media, with the special prosecutor set up by the Department of Justice, unfortunately, is leading toward the possibility of removing a popularly elected president for absolutely nothing. There is not the slightest, remotest, littlest sniff or scent of any proof of Trump's involvement in the election with the Russians. There is nothing there to indicate that he or any of his people made any such arrangement. And as a political consultant, let me say that it is also obviously true that nothing the Russians did or could have done in any way influenced this election. Did they release the Democratic Party emails? Well, assuming they hacked them and it wasn't done domestically by Seth Rich, a disgruntled employee of the Democratic Party, or by Guccifer or any of the other people who might have done it, it didn't do any harm. Hillary entered her convention 4 behind, and she left the convention 11 ahead. So the release of these documents at the beginning of her convention had nothing whatever to do with her defeat. What could have hurt Donald Trump and could have defeated him was that it gave Hillary a hell of an issue, and the intelligence community kept dropping hints that Russia was behind this and kept dropping hints that Trump was colluding with the Russians to do this. And that became Hillary's main issue. In the debates, she spent a huge amount of time in the second and third debates talking about it, saying there's never been a situation before like this in our country's history. So it was Trump who was hurt with that. And then after the election, the intelligence community just continued to put this stuff out, dumping on Trump, trying to bring about the special prosecutor they now have. In this context, the Michael Flynn firing was, I believe, not much related to Russia. I believe it was related to Iran. Flynn was the guy who knew all of Obama's secret incentives to Iran, all of the backroom dealings with Iran, the subsidies that he gave the regime, and the outs that he gave them in the nuclear accord. And there is some significant evidence that the intelligence communities were scared to death that he would out that, publish that information, and lead people to oppose the deal with Iran. The Washington Free Beacon, which is a marvelous newspaper, a week or two ago, published a lengthy story documenting this charge and saying that that is really at the core for the reason that they wanted to get rid of Flynn. And he's become kind of a sacrificial lamb for the Trump administration, very unjustly, partially because he would have opposed that and would have ripped up the agreement with Iran and would have exposed, were he be allowed to stay as national security advisor, would have exposed exactly what happened. But when Hillary says that this has never happened before, that this is unprecedented, that a foreign power tries to influence a U.S. election, I think she's guilty of a serious memory lapse. There was another instance, and the foreign power was China, and the people they were influencing was the 1996 United States election, when vast amounts of money flowed from all kinds of Chinese operatives, from the Chinese government, from the intelligence community, from the army, into Bill Clinton's campaign, their legal defense fund, and all sorts of other purposes. And this resulted in no special prosecutors, no impeachment, nothing of that sort. And yet it is totally illegal for a foreign power or foreign government to contribute to an American campaign, or even for a foreign national, the citizen of another country, to make a personal contribution to an American candidate. And here was likely $2 to $3 billion that flowed into the Clinton campaign coffers from China, the most important and recent effort to influence our policy by these kinds of donations. Now, I'm sorry that throughout this I haven't been able to read your comments. It's a technical thing. This is the first night I've ever done this, and it goes too quickly on my little phone for me to be able to see them and capture them. We'll have to figure out a way to do it again. My concept of this is essentially a call-in show, only we do it through your comments posted on Facebook. And I certainly appreciate the many, many people who are watching and making it. Well, here's one I can answer. Will says the Clinton Foundation is corrupt. Obviously, it's corrupt. After Clinton has left office and stopped running for president, the head of the foundation, Donna Shalala, quit. Most of the staff was fired. Virtually all of its donations dried up. Its charitable projects that were being done not because she was running for office, not for any corrupt reason, just because of their heart, well, those all of a sudden mysteriously stopped. The Haiti Reconstruction Project ended. Everything came to a screeching halt because there was no longer a political purpose to be served, and there was no longer an opportunity for larceny there. Remember that the whole purpose of the Clinton Foundation was to get bribes to Bill Clinton, called speaking fees, or to the family, called foundation donations, in return for special favors and access to the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, and in return for the expectation of future favors from a possible president, Hillary Clinton. And the way you know that that's true is the minute that possibility dried up and she left office as Secretary of State, everything stopped and the donation stopped and the flow stopped. Now, will this be investigated? As long as Comey was there, you know it wouldn't. But if Sessions and a new FBI director are determined to see justice done and to see this bribery case, one of the most blatant and outrageous in American history, is prosecuted, then we will have a chance of changing it. In 1799, John Adams sent 1797. John Adams, president, sent some people, James Monroe and two others, to go to Paris to negotiate an end to the naval war where the French were sinking American ships. And Talleyrand was the foreign minister in France. And he sent word that he'd be happy to see them, but they needed to pay $1 million for him to be willing to do that. and he designated X, Y, and Z as three people that would receive the money on his behalf. And until they were paid, he would not give Monroe or his fellow commissioners even an appointment. Monroe told the American media about it. It went crazy. It was called the XYZ affair, and it virtually it terminated the negotiations and really destroyed them. And the slogan was millions for defense, but not 1 cent for tribute. Well, what did Talleyrand do that Hillary didn't do? Demanding money in return for access to herself. Absolutely the same thing. So Eileen and I have a book coming out in the middle of August on what we've talked about today. It's called Rogue Spooks, the Intelligence Plot to Destroy Donald Trump. And it talks about how the intelligence agencies, both the American and the British agencies, and some of the former spooks who were in the British agencies, all worked together to raise this issue of Russia, and many of them with the intent of leading to the removal of Donald Trump. And we talk a lot about how that happened, how it came up, how it was part of the process that led to Flynn's dismissal, and go through the whole nature of that kind of a threat. And hope you buy it. It's available for pre-order now on Amazon and Barnes & Nobles. Or not yet, but will be soon. And maybe tomorrow. And I also just want to urge you each to go to dickmorris.com, my website, and sign up. If you found this useful, this hour-long discussion, every day I do a 5-minute video. And we could talk about these things in greater depth and as they occur in the news media. To get that, you go to dickmorris.com. You enter your e-address, and I will then send this to you every day. We call it the lunch alert because I send them out at noontime, and we could have lunch together. So let's do lunch. Thanks for watching.